morning to all and welcome to the online classes of NLK group of schools. Today we'll start with another book of our English subject, that is English literature, the very first chapter of this book, that is Darwin Diaries. We all are interested in listening stories from our parents and grandparents. And what if those stories are original? We get more interested and more fascinated to know what happens next. Today, I'm also going to tell you an original story based on a 5-year long historic expedition of Charles Darwin and his team members. But before I proceed with the explanation of the chapter, I would like you all to read something about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a British naturalist whose scientific theory of evolution by natural selection became the foundation of modern evolutionary studies. Darwin formulated his bold theory in private in 1837 to 1839 after returning from a voyage around the world aboard HMS Beagle, but it was not until 2 decades later that he finally gave it in full public expression in On the Origin of Species, a book that has deeply influenced modern society and thought. This was all about Charles Darwin. I would like to give you a brief regarding this content. Students, Charles Darwin was a British naturalist. Naturalist is a person who studies or is an expert in science. He was working on his scientific theory of evolution. Evolution means studying the change in generations over the time. So he was working on this theory and he was on a voyage for this in the ship named HMS Beagle. He completed his evolution theory and then wrote a book on the origin of species which had a great impact on modern Western society. So let's continue with our chapter now. This is page number 5 of your book, an extract of the opening of the story. This is a story of a 5-year long historic expedition, 1832 to 1836, of British naturalist Charles Darwin, based on which Darwin wrote his famous book On the Origin of Species. This account is narrated by 10-year-old James Kincaid through a series of entries in his diary. James is thrilled to have been chosen as an assistant to Darwin on the voyage aboard HMS Beagle. He helps Darwin collect information on different creatures during the journey. In this extract, James, now 15, recounts their voyage to the Galapagos Island between 15 September and 20th October 1835. Now, student, what is this paragraph trying to tell us? This paragraph says that James Kincaid, a 10-year-old boy, was chosen as an assistant to Darwin. He was assisting Darwin to collect information on different species during the journey. He, that is James Kincaid, is now 15 years old and he is recounting the voyage to the Galapagos Island in the ship named HMS Beagle. So let's read what is now going to happen in the story. How is this boy telling us about his expedition along with Charles Darwin to the Galapagos Islands? This is the first page, that is page number 5 of your books. Let's move with the content now. The very first paragraph, that is first part of this lesson. We have left South America and are about to arrive at the Galapagos Islands. There are 15 of them altogether, 600 miles from the coast of Ecuador. They are all formed from volcanic rocks and straddle the equator. Now, this boy tells us that this group of islands was about hundreds of miles away from Ecuador and they were formed from volcanic rocks. They were straddling on both the sides of the equator. Straddle means on either side of the equator. You can see these groups of islands over here. There are about 15 in number. Over here, they are 15 in number, and together they can be called as archipelago. Archipelago means a group of islands together. Now let's move to the next page. This is page number 6 of your book. So let's read. Mr. Darwin is delighted at the prospect of seeing the Galapagos. He says that the collection of islands is a perfect little word by itself. He is eagerly looking forward to exploring them more than anywhere else on our journey. Now the boy tells us that Darwin is really excited to explore that place. Which place? Galapagos Islands. Why is that so? Because Darwin finds that collection of islands a perfect little word. Means they were so beautiful, the sight was so mesmerizing that he wants to explore that place more than any other place he had visited. Now let's move to the second part. We landed in high surface on the northeast coast of Chatham Islands. We waded ashore through the icy water only for our clothes to be dried immediately once on land by the morning heat. Now this boy tells us that they were on the northeast coast of the Chatham Islands, where they were all wet in the icy water and were waiting to reach the land so that the morning heat of the sun could dry their clothes. To our surprise, everything here seems very dark. The beach is made of dark-colored lava. The land all around is jagged and buckled. The only vegetation is the stunted brushwood, scorched by the sun. There are craters and steaming vents everywhere. I have never seen anything like this before. Now the boy tells us regarding the appearance of the land on the northeast coast of the Chatham Islands. Now what he tells us that as he stepped on the land with the team members, what he finds that the beach was made of dark colored lava and the land everywhere was jagged and buckled. Now what does jagged and buckled mean, student? Jagged means with rough and sharp protruding points, and buckled means bent. Simply I could say that the land was uneven. There were craters all around the place. The only vegetation is the stunted brushwood, scorched by the sun. Now he tells us about the vegetation, that there were not much things to be found over there in case to eat. It was just small twigs and branches which had fallen from the leaf on the ground, and that too they were faded. Scorched means fade in color. There are craters and steaming vents everywhere. I have never seen anything like this before. He also tells us that there were craters and steaming vents. Steaming vents means some kind of liquid or gas coming out from a hole in the ground, right? As we all know that these islands were formed from volcanic rocks, so it's obvious that vents and craters will be over there. If you refer to your books, in the side picture, you can see over here, you can see these craters and all. You can see that over here and all. These are all craters. So let's proceed. I hope you are clear with the meaning of this paragraph. Let's move to the third one. But before that, you can see two pictures on your screen. Can anyone identify it? This is albatross. This is albatross. I'll let you know why I'm showing you this picture right now. Let's move to third part. The barrenness of the land is deceptive. The sea around Chatham Island is swarming with fish, sharks and turtle. Now the boy says, I can't accept this all. This is all something fake. This is all deceptive. The sea around the Chatham Island is swarming with fish, sharks and turtle. He tells us that I have come here through the ship, and what is happening Everywhere I could see fishes, sharks, and turtles moving from one place to the other. And as soon as I've landed on this land, what is happening? Everything is so dull. The crew have been enjoying themselves fishing. He tells that they had been enjoying fishing in that water while coming to this place. The birds are unaccustomed to human company here. They hop up very close, ignoring the pebbles that are being thrown at them. It is even possible to prod or catch them. Now he tells regarding the birds over there. This is the reason I showed you a picture before. The albatross. That is the bird found on the Chatham Islands. Now he tells us about the bird that they are not scared of humans. Even we could touch them, we could prod them. Prod means to poke them or catch them very easily. They were ignoring the pebbles we were throwing at them just because they were unaccustomed. They were not habitual of the human company. Now let's move to the fourth part. Today, we came across the sea-going iguana. These creatures swarms in its hundred over the rocks. The iguana is very tame. Now, what is the boy trying to tell us? After the birds, he came across the iguanas. He and his team members came across the iguana. This creature swarms in its hundreds over the rocks. Now, he tells us that they move in groups over the rocks. Iguana is very tame. That is, it is not wild. It is not scared of human company. It will put up with being prodded and poked. Means he's just ignoring being prodded and poked when you are touching or something. Mr. Darwin even picked up one, swung it around his head, and threw it into a rock pool. It just picked itself up again and waddled back to where it had been lying, as if nothing had happened. Now, what did Mr. Darwin do with that iguana? He just picked up one from a tail, swung it around his head, round, and then he threw it away. Now, had there been some other animal, what would it have done? He would have attacked us, right? He would have attacked us. But what did this iguana do? When the creature returned, he repeated it just picked itself up again and waddled back to where it had been lying as if nothing had happened. It just came back to the original place he was sitting. He didn't react to this action of Mr. Darwin. Mr. Darwin threw it back into the rock pool. When the creature returned, he repeated the operation once more. The iguana plodded back to its place. Mr. Darwin concluded that whereas European lizards have learned to fear man, these iguanas have failed to develop that hereditary instinct. Now, what did Mr. Darwin do? He repeated the same process again. Operation means process. An iguana, it made the effort to come back to the original place once again. From this, Mr. Darwin concluded that like European lizards have learned to fear man, these iguanas have failed to develop that characteristics. What characteristic? Hereditary instinct over here means characteristics which an individual or a species derives from an older one. Over here, European lizards and iguanas are of the same category of a reptile. I like to show you the picture of an iguana. Just see, this is an iguana. You can see it's similar to a lizard. Now, Mr. Darwin is comparing this iguana to a European lizard, and he says that European lizards fear human beings, while these iguanas have failed to develop that characteristics. The iguana saw the side of the rock pool as a safe sanctuary, so it kept returning to it. What was the reason for the iguana to return to the same point? Because it find that place of the rock pool as a safe one. So it returned to the same place. So it kept returning to it even though Mr. Darwin insisted on throwing it back in the pool, but it returned to the same place again and again. Now let's move to the vocab part we have done for today. First word is naturalist. Naturalist student, as I told you, a person who studies or is an expert in natural science. Who is the naturalist over here? Yes, Mr. Darwin. Charles Darwin is the naturalist over here. Second word, straddle. Second word is straddle, students. Here exist on either side. The Galapagos Islands were straddling on the either side of the equator. Now the third one, jagged, with rough and sharp protruding points. This word we came across when we were studying about the appearance of the land on the Chatham Islands. Fourth word is buckled, that is bent. Fifth word is stunted, that is dwarfish or short. Stunted became across when we were studying about the vegetation of the Chatham Islands. Sixth word is prod, poke with fingers, foot or a pointed object. Who was being prodded? Yes, the birds and the iguanas, but they didn't fear human company. Seventh word is operation, the process. Operation means the process. Why is this word operation used over here? Yes, student, Mr. Darwin was continuously repeating the same process of throwing the iguana into the pool. Then the eighth word is brushwood, twigs and small branches that have broken off from trees and bushes. This is regarding the vegetation of the Chatham Islands. Let's move further and have a quick recap of today's content. James Kincaid, a 10-year-old boy, now 15, is the narrator of the story. He recounts their voyage to the Galapagos Islands. Now, James Kincaid is narrating the story. I already informed you about it. Then, next point, they are about to arrive at the archipelago of the Galapagos Islands. Archipelago, group of islands together. Then the next point, Darwin says that the collection of islands is a perfect word by itself. Next point, the beach was made of dark colored lava. Land all around was jagged and buckled. The only vegetation was the stunted brushwood, scorched by the sun. There were craters and steaming vents everywhere. This whole point is regarding the vegetation of the place. Next point, the sea around the Chatham Island was swarming with fishes, sharks and turtles. Right? The birds were unaccustomed to human company. It was even possible to catch them. And the last point, the iguanas failed to develop hereditary instinct. I hope this will help you to recall the chapter whenever you want. In case you have any query related to the chapter, you can ask on your WhatsApp groups. Thank you and have a nice day.